subjects, but this time we're going to focus more on innovation, technology, Africa, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we'll start with Susan. Susan, the floor is yours. I think you're on mute now, please.
You are right. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Titi and Afronomics for inviting me and for setting up this platform. Yeah, as Titi has mentioned, I'll talk about many things: technology, innovation, solidarity, and the African Continental Free Trade Area or Agreement. And I thought this was a moment for us to think about what do we learn from COVID-19 situation for the current or ongoing or forthcoming negotiations of the AfCFTA. The second phase of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement or AfCFTA will focus on intellectual property, investment, and competition, and maybe e-commerce. So it got me thinking, what do we have in the basket? From Titi's introduction and all the presentations have hammered the point that most of the intellectual property regimes we have, not most, actually basically all, they are foreign to Africa. And they are protected. Intellectual property is protected. So we have to use it under exceptions, which Amak has just demonstrated. They have a lot of limitations. We may not be able to use it in practice. And we don't have the means to pay for it, because that's the alternative to exceptions, that we pay for it because it's someone's property anyway. So I was looking, and I took my presentation is based on conversations with people on the continent, especially regional economic communities, which I thought I would inquire and probe and find out how are they managing and what is their vision and what is the way forward. Because I think that the AfCFTA will need to take some lessons from the regional communities. So the question I had in mind, what have we learned from COVID-19, or how are the regional communities managing COVID-19 that could be of lessons, positive or negative, for the AfCFTA negotiations. And just to draw a few minutes back, and I'll talk slightly about the solidarity platform or solidarity call. I'll be very brief because I think David will give it a better treatment. But what I wanted to highlight is the relationship with African countries, like many African countries that do not have the technology really. It's a technology call, as it has been explained. And one of the things it causes the sharing of technology, including intellectual property, including data, globally. It's like one gets it and one shares, or what shares information. And I want to particularly stress the reaction of the pharmaceutical companies to this particular kind of call. The solidarity call was launched on 29th May, and shortly before that, the pharmaceutical companies had a meeting, and one of the top leaders called this a nonsense to think that there will be voluntary licensing of intellectual property because it's what the WHO, or what we think and believe, is a pandemic, the COVID-19. And what came along as a question to me, okay, there may be flexibilities, okay, maybe there are exceptions at the international level, but what happens if the owner of the technology doesn't want to share? Yes, we might agree that we need to share, but we can't force different constituents to share. Pharmaceutical companies, just an example here I've picked on. The EU has gone along to do its own thing and to focus on its own member states. Understandably, we've just had the example of Gilead and the USA and the UK, understandably. So the question I raised in one of my posts, there's a post I put up on Afronomics on the 16th of June. It was actually specifically in preparation for this. Is Africa able to come up with technological solutions to Africa's health problems? That's one. Two, how could this be, or what can be gathered or gleaned from what is already happening on the continent? Because I raise this because from the conversations, it's like there's been an acceptance that all solutions for Africa or all solutions for developing countries have to come from what the developed country have decided. And what has been decided? We can only use intellectual property as a way of exceptions or flexibilities. But this is a situation where, okay, we can't even use voluntary licensing. We cannot use compulsory licensing. As Amak has just said, there's no innovation. We don't have the capacity. But then it doesn't mean we are that doomed, according to my research and conversations. I was enjoying my conversations with people since yesterday and today from the continent. I remember, some years ago, I was listening to my mentor, Professor Ruth Okediji, and she raised a question. She had raised a question in one article whether creativity has died in Africa. Does Africa create? And I'm raising a question now. Does Africa innovate? And especially in this moment, can we? And if yes or no, what are the implications for the FCTA? I focus on FCTA because it's going to be a continental framework. We want trade. There's an aspiration for trade on the African continent. You cannot detach intellectual property and technology from trade. So it needs to be fixed, or we need to understand where we stand. That's how I raise it. I don't think innovation has died in Africa. Just it may not be defined or understood the way it's understood in the West. And I give two examples, which I also take as indicators of what could be considered as input for the FCTA document or instrument. Just this morning, I was talking to one of the regional communities, and we just, during the conversation, I learned that actually regional communities, okay, the East African community, I'm sorry I had to research on that, that's because that's where I come from. Charity starts at home. So there have been work to concretize access to pharmaceuticals, much as the ESC members, the 6 member states are parties to the international agreements. And before even the conversation on intellectual properties or pharmaceuticals starts in the FCTA, it has already started on the regional level. There is a conversation, and there's collaboration with African Union, there's collaboration with COMESA and SADC because there's a tripartite agreement. So we see the dynamics there. Already there is that thinking. So what needs to be done is really guiding what goes into that document. Is there creativity? There is this one example I'll give. You have the CENIC, the Center for, I forget the full name. Anyway, it's a center of excellence in East Africa. You have students who come up with innovation of different kinds under open access. And the condition of the innovation is that it has to be useful to the regional community, to the East African community. So there are those two conditions already. And there was this particular situation that just hit me. The students came up with a program that helps detect drowsiness, or a drowsiness detector. And these are students. And said, okay, we need to put it where to be used most useful. And it was put to a bus. It was proposed to a bus company, Kira Bus Company. Kira has come up with an e-bus. Do you see that? We see how technology is coming up. And that whole process and that project is being supported by the Ugandan government. So you have the centers of excellence, you have the industry and the government, policymakers, researchers, and industry coming together. Not just the industry like we would have it at the West, or we have it in our minds. And when we are thinking about protection or about rules in the CFCTA, one of the things I challenged in my short write-up that we need to come up with local solutions to our challenges. And what are our regional realities? We don't have access to as much innovation, as much money as others, but they have brains too. And the rules need to be adjusted and not just big roughly. One of the things I question that instead of harmonizing international standards, we should actually think of coming up with our own rules. There's no law against that. There will be, if any country comes with trade sanctions, it won't be because there's a violation, it will be something else. And that brings me to the second point. The need for using the negotiations of the FCTA as a bargaining chip with trading partners in the West as to what should be the conditions and what is necessary and useful technology for the continent. The last point, because I'm running out, we'll come back to this if necessary, is the encouragement of creativity or innovation of what we have in what particular facility, but it can be put to other purposes. What we see now, and understand so there's a lot of effort that is going into finding vaccines and solutions to the COVID-19. What will happen when we are not handling that anymore? Or that's not what we are addressing. We have other health challenges. And this I again got a real example. When people are thinking of this kind of technologies on African continent, they really need to be open as opposed to proprietary or closed. So this technology, yes, this kind of technologies are not so much encouraged in the West, but you're saying this is made in Africa and we do it our way, the way it works. So what do I mean? Let's take again the example of COVID. Okay, we stop to come up with COVID material or protection of vaccine. And I want to emphasize why I take it because the first COVID ventilator was actually created through this kind of mechanism that now it's not needed, so we go to another one. So when it's not needed, then we might have to think to expand hepatitis C, production of hepatitis C vaccine like Quality Chemicals in Uganda is doing, or other vaccines or other medicines. But for that to happen, the technology has to be open. Then the question might be, then how do you encourage young entrepreneurs who are spending sleepless nights coming up with solutions? That's when the government needs to come in and remunerate those people. They get some kind of recompense until such a time when we've developed our technology that then we can protect everything and pay it up. Thank you. I stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Susan, for those excellent thoughts. So now we are going back to the conceptualization of intellectual property. What are the justifications for intellectual property? Is there an incentive to innovate? Do governments have to rethink what types of incentive we need to develop to ensure that we're designing and introducing technologies that will be fit for purpose for Africa? Then other question would be, what types of technologies are we referring to? Should we be looking at the home front, at national levels, at regional levels, for the types of technologies that we can develop within Africa? And I think that's an excellent way in to link to the discussion that Jackie would be presenting. The other point you raised were the developments that we have at the regional economic community. So what is happening, for example, in East African Regional Economic Community, and how can we harness this divergent developments that we have around technological innovations within the different fragments of economic communities we have in Africa to provide a holistic technological framework that will be beneficial to the whole of Africa. One platform that you have suggested could be a way forward would be the African Continental Free Trade Area. So going back to intellectual property rights within the African Continental Free Trade Area, which will be negotiated in phase 2, and think about how we can then design effective systems that will be fit for purpose for Africa. So thank you very much, Susanna. We will come back to those questions in the Q&A session.